皆様、こんにちは。
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you for watching Nissan Sustainability Seminar 2022. I am Misako Yoshinari from the Global Communications team of Nissan Motor Company. This seminar consists of two sections, presentation and panel discussion. In the first section, we would like to present Nissan's initiatives in the area of sustainability as well as materiality. In the second section, we invited experts who are knowledgeable to have the panel discussion on environmental and social issues that we are facing. We would like to begin by presenting what we are doing on the sustainability front. The presenter is Chief Sustainability Officer Joji Tegawa. Tegawa-san, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for the Nissan Sustainability Seminar 2022. This seminar coincides with the recent publication of our annual sustainability report. In this latest report, our Chief Executive Officer Makoto Uchida emphasizes how Nissan is embedding sustainability throughout every aspect of the business to deliver the mobility solutions and organizational practices needed to realize a cleaner, safer, and more inclusive world. He also clearly states that Nissan's corporate purpose and long-term vision have clearly underscored our commitment to the world. Sustainability is fundamental to the value that we provide to our customers and society as we strive to together empower mobility. As we have seen from the climate emergencies around the world this summer, every business must become more sustainable, whether in terms of emissions, energy use, resource management, and through to the efficiency and availability of our clean, advanced products and services. At Nissan, we now put sustainability at the heart of everything that we strive to do. Our corporate purpose is driving innovation to enrich people's lives. In order to realize this, we must continue to do so with a purpose and culture that makes a positive impact on society through the transport solutions, the employment opportunities, and the community benefits in every market where we operate. This is core to our foundation and the reflection of the trust that we endeavor to uphold with our stakeholders. Over the past year, we have set out our new long-term vision, Nissan Ambition 2030, with the aim of together empowering mobility and beyond. This again reflects the purpose and the culture with which we are addressing sustainability. One of the most important elements of Ambition 2030 is working, solving, and collaborating on these issues together. We believe we will succeed only by working together, by expanding further on partnerships with industry, our suppliers, alliance partners, customers, and governments to realize a cleaner, safer, and more inclusive society. These efforts are aimed at addressing the three shifts that we see driving fundamental change for businesses and society over the long term. Climate change remains the central challenge of our era. Societal issues are emerging from aging populations and rapidly growing cities, both demanding better access to mobility. And consumers are pushing companies to address environmental and societal issues by delivering new innovations and mobility services. Our ambitions in each of these critical areas is clear. Nissan is committed to delivering on our goal of becoming carbon neutral across the company's operations and the life cycle of our products by 2050. We are daring to develop even more advanced driver assistant innovations to greatly enhance collision avoidance. And we are committed to expanding our mobility technologies and empower the strength of our diverse employees and communities for a more inclusive society. These efforts embody our shared sustainability and business goals as we strive to achieve zero emissions, zero fatalities, and zero inequality. These efforts are reflected by how we summarize our environmental, social, and governance responsibilities in the latest sustainability report. We know that stakeholders want to see the way we assess these responsibilities. So, we have undertaken a deeper assessment of the priority for environmental and social issues that Nissan faces. Our aim is to ensure that Nissan is best placed to create value and have a positive impact on people, the planet, and society. Our assessment is that long-term value creation will be driven at the intersection of innovation and sustainability. It is at this intersection that we are now prioritizing our most important environmental, societal, and governance needs, where Nissan can create the highest value for society and our company. We have identified 21 material areas among our ESG factors where Nissan must address. Demonstrating our commitment to prioritizing ESG at the strategic level, these areas have been validated and will continue to be closely tracked by our executive members and the board of directors. This approach to prioritizing our ESG efforts is closely aligned with the strategic sustainable finance framework that Nissan has also launched. This new framework will enable material fundraising efforts for accelerating Nissan's innovations in next-generation electrified vehicles, batteries, environmental technologies, and new mobility services. The validation and monitoring of our sustainability performance and how it intersects with our purpose and innovation are key to ensuring we deliver against our commitments. Let me give you some examples of areas that we judge to be material issues for Nissan. These are the areas where we are putting our words into action. At Nissan, we regard vehicle electrification as key, especially as this is an area where we have a more than 10-year head start over our competitors in electrification. We aim to maintain a steady product momentum by introducing 23 new electrified models, including 15 new EVs that that offer diversified choices and experiences for our customers. Nissan will reach an electrification mix of more than 50% by 2030 globally across the Nissan and Infiniti brands. Another highlight of the past year is that Nissan has joined the Race to Zero campaign supported by the United Nations as the first Japanese automaker. Nissan is committed to building a comprehensive EV ecosystem. To support the development of a circular economy, we are ensuring that vehicle batteries remain sustainable. This is a priority for Nissan based on our decade of repurposing and recycling expertise with 4R Energy Corporation in Japan, and goal to extend these efforts to North America and Europe. We assess diversity as a source of Nissan's competitiveness and are promoting it with a high priority. Diversity is also one of our greatest strengths, and it also enhances our most important asset, our people. This is a very important initiative that will support Nissan's future. Our materiality assessment of our ESG priorities includes several items on people such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, employee health and safety, and human resource development. This shows our motivation to empower Nissan's most important asset, our people. We aim to create an inclusive environment where every person in Nissan is encouraged and supported to reach their full potential. It is critical for our future to build an organization that is deeply valued by its own people. Our journey to realize our corporate purpose and Nissan Ambition 2030 can only be achieved if we commit to respect and protect human rights within Nissan and across our supply chain. This is a key priority as we look to future-proof our organization and deepen our engagement with more communities. Strong corporate governance and regulatory compliance likewise remains a fundamental priority for Nissan. We are likewise committed to regaining the trust of our stakeholders by continuing to transform our corporate culture, acting with transparency, respect, and difference through all levels of our organization. Our commitment includes the company's executive compensation system, which is based on index related to the climate change and human rights. As a business, we are committed to providing transparency on all issues, including sustainability, to our stakeholders. This motivates our discussion today, where we have assembled a panel of experts to discuss best practices globally on these perennial and fast-evolving issues. Nissan's approach is not just a reaction to near-term challenges. No matter how big they are, Nissan is getting ahead of both near and long-term challenges in society by investing in innovation and creating new growth opportunities. By doing so, Nissan will be able to adapt to the social trends and structural changes impacting our whole industry. And we remain true to having sustainability at the core of our purpose and strategy. Thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. Thank you. Tagawa-san, thank you for your presentation. Under the topic of addressing essential issues of sustainability, we have invited the experts to organize the panel discussion. As Tagawa-san presented earlier, we are facing various environmental and societal issues today. In order to create a truly sustainable future, how should we address and approach these issues? How should we address the issues that are difficult to be resolved by a company alone or an individual alone? In order to answer these questions, In the panel discussion today, we have invited experts with a lot of knowledge in sustainability, leading authorities. There are 3 individuals we have invited. Let me introduce you to one by one. University of Tokyo Institute for Future Initiative, Senior Principal Researcher of National Institute of Environmental Studies, Professor Seita Emori-san. JP Morgan Asset Management, Head of the Investment Stewardship, Ms. Shizuko Omi. Nissan Motor Company Chief Sustainability Officer, Joji Tagawa-san. And our moderator is CEO of Owls Consulting Group, Special Advisor to Minister Secretariat at METI, Keisuke Hanyuda-san. Hanyuda-san, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. We'd now like to focus on essential issues of sustainability and talk about climate change and partnership. This is the topic of our panel discussion today. Our panelists are very well balanced. They cover science, finance, and business. They are at the forefront of these 3 areas. As time is limited, I do hope we will be able to talk about the essential nature and also the true intent of these people as much as possible. Yes, we all understand the directionality of the importance of sustainability, but against the backdrop, yes, there's need to change quickly, but we're really in a haste. I hope that we'll be able to hear the real intentions and the real thoughts of these people. So I would like to invite each panelist to introduce themselves first and talk about their initiatives in relation to sustainability very briefly. So first, could I invite upon Emori-san to start this session. Emori-san, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Well, I've been spending 25 years researching climate change at the National Institute for Environmental Studies. I started out focusing on climate model. Dr. Manabe, who won the Nobel Prize last year, he began this modeling of climate change. So I've been doing research into this area for that long. But recently, I'm no longer involved in that analysis. I've shifted to something different. So using climate modeling, maybe we could leverage the expertise learned from climate modeling to address social issues. And I've been involved in various discussions pertaining to climate change from that perspective. So to put it bluntly, IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, is there. They are part of the UN initiative, and scientists from around the world are gathered to try to come up with a report on climate change. So I've been, in the last 2 reports, I was responsible for as an author in the science part of this IPCC report. From this April, I've joined the Institute for Future Initiatives at the University of Tokyo. I've been assigned as the professor for Institute for Future Initiatives at the University of Tokyo. So now, I would like to begin work about focusing on future vision. As far as the topic of research is concerned, I'm involved in both research and practice. There's the Climate Citizen Conference that I'm involved in. This is a forum whereby ordinary citizens come together. They're randomly selected, and they are now part of the discussions to provide recommendations about climate change. So I'm very much involved in this initiative. So my name is Seita Emori. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you very much. Next, could I call upon Omi-san to take the floor. Ms. Omi, the floor is yours. Thank you. My name is Omi. Thank you for this very lovely invitation. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be invited. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Now, as for myself, I'm part of JP Morgan Chase Group, which is an international global financial, and I'm with JP Morgan Asset Management arm of this group. And I'm involved I'm the head of investment stewardship, and I'm the leader of this department here in Japan. As far as this department is concerned, we focus on ESGs and sustainability in our investees. And we have direct dialogue with companies, our investees, on these topics. So I'm encouraging ESG response as well as encouraging disclosure of ESG on the part of our investees. So that being the case, with Nissan, we have very active dialogue on a day-to-day basis. We appreciate that opportunity. As for JP Morgan Asset Management, in 2007, we signed up to the UN investment principle, and in our investment process, we incorporate ESG. This is already integrated in our investment process. So this applies to both equities as well as debts. In various financial assets, we are incorporating these elements into our decision making. For example, climate change and also various challenges ahead. This really have impact on long-term enterprise value, and the importance is increasing. So that is our thought in addressing this topic. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you. So from Nissan Motors, we have this Takasa, Chief Sustainability Officer. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I will be brief. Since 3 years ago, I was appointed Chief Sustainability Officer. Originally, I was in the finance team and investor relations for long years. And we had a lot of opportunities to talk to shareholders and investors for more than 15 years when I was responsible for IR. And traditional notions of sales, free cash flow are still important. However, over the recent years, we have seen that these investors and shareholders are asking a lot of questions about sustainability initiatives, not only the short-term profit, but on the long term. How, no matter how the environment evolves, do we have a sustainable business model as a company? When I was responsible for IR, these are the questions that were often asked. And being a chief sustainable, I aspire to be a chief sustainable officer or assume the responsibility. And now I'm in the position as a life work and do my job. Thank you, Tagawa-san.
Thank you. If I may introduce myself, I'll be serving as the moderator of the session today. My name is Hanyuda, the Managing Director and CEO of Ols Consulting Group. Our company, Ols Consulting Group, is a business consulting firm. It helps us with this strategy as well as human rights due diligence on the part of our corporate clients. So as was introduced earlier, I'm also the special advisor to the Minister's Secretary to METI as well. And in the summer, business and human rights will be focused upon in the summer. And I'll be taking part in this forum to discuss the relations between these two topics. I'm also with the NPO and NGO. So that being the case, I work with companies, governments, as well as with the social sector. So from those different perspectives, I believe I'm able to address sustainability issues as well as climate change issue together with all of you. Thank you very much. That is all for my self-introduction. Thank you so much. So now let us start the substance of our panel discussion. Let me start with the first topic, which is the core of the climate change response. We talk about, can we really avert? Are we really in time to avert global warming crisis? We want to address this very essential topic. We have to be in time. We have to be in time to avert the crisis. So going forward, what needs to be changed? What are some of the significant changes we need to bring about to avert this crisis? So my first question, let me start with Emori-san. You talked about the report of IPCC. You are the author of IPCC report. Indeed. And I think we are now at a critical point whereby we are near the tipping point of climate change. We have no time left now. We have no luxury of time left. So what must the world do before we can avert this crisis? If you could share that with us, if you could be blunt, I would appreciate it. Thank you. So Emori-san, would you like to start? Thank you so much. So let me talk about some scientific base assumptions. Let me talk about scientific assumptions. Could you please project this slide at this juncture? I also have some video as well, so please take a look at this video. So this is the simulation of climate. This follows the evolution of temperature. It starts from 1950. The top part, this is business as usual, the worst scenario where there are no countermeasures are taken. The bottom is where we're aiming to 2 degrees to contain the temperature rise to 2 degrees. So these are the two scenarios that you see on this page. So you see that in the North Pole, the temperature is declining. But up into the 1920s, there isn't much change between the two. But then there's a greater gap. As you can see, as the time evolves, you can see that there's a greater gap between the two. So from 2060, there's a major gap. The bottom chart, they'll be able to hold at 2050 degrees, at 2050 temperature. But then the top, you see that the global warming will accelerate from 20 2050. And also in the northern hemisphere, there's going to be significant temperature rise after 2050. And so we come to 2100. The top part, of course, shows a very critical situation. We're talking about global average of 5 degrees temperature rise. And in the northern hemisphere, there's a temperature rise from 6 to 8 degrees, as you can see. So this will be very critical. So we have to contain to below 1.5 degrees, as you see on the bottom chart. And this is long-term vision set forth under the Paris Agreement. So I just wanted to show a visual presentation of these temperature rises. I hope that you'll take away this visual image. So that is the starting point of my talk. So if the temperature rise, if the global warming goes beyond 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees, what will happen? We're already experiencing the impact. We see record heat taking place, rainfall. We see floods, so typhoons, even greater intensity typhoons taking place. And also there's greater number of droughts. And also in the dry area, there is going to be food supply crisis as well as water supply crisis. And of course, we see a rise in the water, in the sea surface and environmental damages. These are all frequently heard terms, I'm sure, for many of you. This is already taking place. Compared to the pre-industrial revolution, we already have 1.1 degrees temperature rise on a global average. And around the world, we see record damages taking place as a result of this global average temperature rise. Also, the countries that have poor countries that have no responsibility in the temperature rise, and the vulnerable people, these are the ones who are being severely affected. And as global warming accelerates, then the damages to these people will become even more severe. So therefore, this will be translated into human rights violation, and the human rights violation will become even more serious. They have no responsibility in preventing global warming, but what should be the one to be on the blunt of this impact? So we have to halt global warming as soon as possible. So this is a very important assumption behind this discussion. And also you asked about the tipping point. So if the global warming goes beyond tipping point, then the ice in North Pole will begin, and also you see the rainforest in Amazon will accelerate. So there's going to be a tipping point where we cannot stop. Now, scientifically, what temperature rise will be the tipping point? We do not know, but as the global warming accelerates, we will be scientifically coming closer to the tipping point, although we do not know the exact temperature rise at this point. So that is why we need to put a halt as soon as possible. And that is there's a global agreement on 1.5 degrees temperature rise. If we are to hold the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees around 2050, CO2 emission around the world will have to be reduced to zero. Net zero emission has to be achieved by 2050. And also, we have to reduce other global warming gas such as methane significantly at this time. So these are the scientific assumptions I wanted to share. Thank you very much. So indeed, you're indicating that the emerging countries who have no responsibility in global warming, their damages are very significant, especially in relation to human rights. Although we're talking about climate change, this also impacts human rights. And there's a time limit. I think it's important that there is a time limit to avert this situation. Thank you so much for your input. So now, against the sense of crisis, we need to change our society. We need to bring about change. But then, all the time is limited, how can societies, industries evolve and change? How can we bring about a transition? So, Omi-san, I want to ask about this transition. We have to change. We have to transition. We have to make the transition. But what the financial industries, what do you look for in companies in order to halt this situation? What are the expectations on the part of the financial institutions? Well, transition requires a lot of mobilization of funds. We need significant mobilization of funds to realize transition. This was actually in the article of Nikkei newspaper today. $125 trillion will be required by 2050 if we are to achieve this topic, this goal. And also, the major capital markets around the world, we need Global Financial Markets Association in their report. The global market will regard $150 trillion toward 2050 if we are to avert this crisis. So the financial institutions, therefore, that being the case, have to realize effective financing in a very effective manner and with a sense of speed. That is a responsibility on the part of the financial institutions. Then how can we enable this? What are the conditions required to realize this? first of all, the companies themselves. They have to have robust decarbonization target. We need clear targets, and we also need to address what type of roadmaps they have. It's important that we encourage companies to come up with clear roadmaps. So interim targets are necessary before they can achieve it. Those interim targets need to be translated into short-term targets and translated into the business strategy and business plan. Based on that, capital plan must be introduced, and also capex must also be ironed out. They have to be clarified on the part of the companies, and they need concrete explanation. Unless they have concrete explanation, financial institutions will not offer support to such companies. So disclosure is going to be very important going forward, I believe. As far as we're concerned, we are an operating company in the capital market. There's a new initiative in the market, Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative, that is now very popular. So many financial institutions are now taking part in this initiative, and $60 trillion are now being managed by these institutions. So these management companies, management organizations should work toward net zero, and they should iron out the portfolio. What type of structure they bring to the portfolio? We are now working on this as we speak. So in terms of setting interim target, we are now having in-house discussion on this matter as to what type of interim targets we need to achieve. And having said that, we are part of the JP Morgan Chase Group. This is their parent company. The group also is talking about Net Zero Banking Alliance. They're part of the Net Zero Banking Alliance. This is under the auspices of the United Nations. What they're doing is to bring about net zero investment and loans as well. That is what they are aiming for. This is this English slide. I do apologize, but over the 10 years, they're trying to finance $2.5 trillion worth of sustainable financing. And they want to make sure that $1 trillion will be used to support green initiatives. So that is the target which we have set. And also the next slide. Please take a look at the next slide. This is the loans and investment portfolio. How can we encourage our clients to make transition to net zero? So we set up an interim target in six key sectors. We set interim targets in so oil and gas, electricity, and auto manufacturing. So these are the three important sectors. For these three important sectors, we set a 2030 target. This is the 2030 target reductions in emission intensity by sector. And based on this assumption, we have engagement with our clients and our customers, and we try to support our clients transition through these dialogues. So sense of speed is very critical, I believe, at this juncture. So 2030 is less than 10 years away, although we are focused on 2050. We have less than 10 years before we can achieve these targets. So we need very concrete roadmaps on the part of the investees. This is very important. Thank you. Now, if I could ask some questions. Omi-san, if I could ask you the following question. So, as far as the companies and operating companies are concerned, these companies, I'm sure that as a financial institutions, you have a distinction between companies that are making robust measures and other companies that are not making robust measures. I'm sure this will be used to identify to whom you want to invest. But so, from the standpoint of business operating companies, the business operators are very, I think they want to make sure that the financial institutions can actually scrutinize what they're doing. So some companies simply pretend that they're doing well. So when it comes to this disclosure of progress, what are companies that are making robust measures and those companies that are simply making a gesture? As a financial institution, can you make a distinction between companies that are doing robust measures and companies that are simply making a gesture? Well, thank you for the question. When we make a distinction, we need to enhance the structure on the part of the financial institutions as well. So we need tools. So what are some of the data and tools and analysis tools that should be owned by the financial institutions? We need robust data tools on the part of the financial institutions to make this discussion. So we need to invest in that. We need to make sure that we have very rich data set on the part of the financial institutions. Also, we need engagement with the clients. We need to reinforce our staff and team that can address dialogue with our clients. And so as far as the companies are concerned, Well, how could I put it? If we are to scrutinize what they're doing actually on the ground, disclosure is going to be very critical. What type of information do they disclose? We need more than financial information. We need information about sustainability, and we need, but the disclosure sustainability tend to be very dispersed. They're not integrated. Many companies are disclosing sustainability in their respective fashion, and that's wonderful. Each individual company's efforts are wonderful. However, as an outside financial institution, we need to iron out. We need to make a comparison between these different measures among different companies. So the standard for disclosure need to be standardized. That is important. Standardized criteria for disclosure is going to be important. So I guess the backdrop, there's now obligation and legal obligation being imposed on disclosure of various sustainability information. And here in Japan as well, TCFD and also response to climate change disclosure is now part of the corporate governance code. So if you want to, for listed companies in TSE prime market, that's going to be required going forward. So I think we need to make disclosure mandatory and obligatory here in Japan. And that type of directionality is now seen in various countries. But if the standards among different countries vary from one country to the other, this is going to be problematic. So we need harmonization. And harmonization is now being accelerated as we speak. So therefore, that situation, I think, needs to be understood by various companies and make their disclosure based on this understanding. So disclosure is going to be very important. It's going to be very important. Thank you very much. So the financial institutions need to evolve. They need to evolve with tools. They also need to standardize the requirements for disclosure. And in line with that, the companies also need to respond accordingly. Thank you for pointing that out. So Nissan, you have engagement with financial institutions. Takao-san, you did a lot of interactions with financial institutions as the head of investor relations. So you're now responsible for sustainability at Nissan. I'd appreciate your thoughts about Nissan themselves. But you talked about carbon neutrality in the life cycle of the car in its entirety. That is the goal which you have set for Nissan. But it's not going to be easy to achieving this target, right? So there are some things that you can do on your own, for example, electrification, that can be done independently by yourself. You can promote that, I'm sure. And you're ahead of the rest of the pack, and you're ahead of the competition in this regard. But then it's not just a question of Nissan. You need to address climate change overall. That's something you want to do. So electrification can be done by Nissan, but actions that can be done by Nissan. More than that, you need to. So commit on the part of Nissan. You cannot be on the part of Nissan. So if you could talk about that, please.
Thank you for your question. Since 2010, globally, we have introduced Nissan Leaf EV. So we are advanced in the domain of EV, but just building and selling EV is not at all sufficient. As you said, throughout the life cycle or across the entire value chain, including the emission from the car in scope 1, 2, 3, in all the areas, we need to reduce the CO2 emission. Otherwise, we are unable to address climate change issue. There are two things that we can do as a company. Because we are early adopter of EV, we have a lot of experience in battery. We can use battery as a storage, power storage. Storing power is very effective solution. So V2X, vehicle to home, vehicle to office, there are different aspects of V2X. What people often say is that automobiles, more than 90% of a car, 90% of the time, the car is parked. So you need to generate value while the cars are not used. And when the used battery comes back, we can use it as a power storage. These operations will give additional contribution on top of what we do by selling the EV. And as you have seen in the slide, EV 360, in this program, last year in the Sunderland plant in United Kingdom, we announced to build an all-new EV and battery, 9-gigawatt battery plant will be built. And by using microgrid, we will produce using the renewable energy. So it's a 360-degree EV cycle, not only building EV, but we are using renewable energy. Together with Sunderland municipality and UK government are supporting this. And together with the battery suppliers, we are constructing this ecosystem. This was announced last year in the UK, and we are trying to do something similar in other regions, including Japan. That's our intention.
Thank you very much. Indeed, you are ahead in terms of electrification. You also have the big picture as well. So going forward, Tagawa-san, I would like to ask this question. So as you lead such business activities, is there a sense of internal crisis? Is there a sense of internal urgency inside Nissan? Is there a sense of urgency inside Nissan? Are you worried about how the world outside is not responding? Can you share with us what type of urgency you feel?
Yes, sense of urgency. In that sense, today, it's people well understood or share the same notion. Today, for example, in Japan, we have a headquarters in Japan. In Japan, including EV, we are building different cars. And one of the challenges that we are facing is energy mix. Even if we build the same EV, for example, if we are generating power based on fossil fuels, CO2 is not emitted while we are driving the EV, but while the nuclear power generation is suspended, we are using the fossil fuels. Even if it were the same EV, compared to the European-built cars, EV in Japan is dirtier and it may be subjected to the carbon tax. So we are approaching the Japanese government to use more renewable energy. We should be less expensive. That's what we are trying to do. And today, the Japanese government shared this notion, and we are involved in many initiatives. But this is still weak at this point of time. In terms of sense of urgency in company, we have been working on EV for long years. So in terms of new car building, we have an agreed notion. But when it comes to using the storage battery or how much we should develop or contribute to the circular economy requires more, we have to secure budget, increase the manpower so that we can contribute throughout the life cycle. That's what we need to reinforce at Nissan. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Nissan is so ahead, and you're really making efforts on your own. If I could turn to Omi-san again. So these are very advanced cases. These are best practices that we can learn from. But as for the financial industry is concerned, you can see Nissan is being advanced. But there are laggards as well. They're more advanced, and also there are laggards as well. So Omi-san, what is your sense of urgency? What is your sense of the industry as a whole? Because if we listen to Nissan, we might get a very positive impression. But maybe in the auto industry, aren't there laggards where you feel a sense of urgency? So what are some of the laggards that you're worried about? Well, laggards, there are issues in this industry. I think the issue is with the energy sector in Japan. This is very problematic, if I may say so. So, for example, we need more concrete sense of speed on the part of the efforts by these industries, because they're the foundation of the overall industry. Unless this issue is resolved, the Japanese companies, Japanese corporate sector's competitiveness will be undermined as a result. So we need decarbonization on the part of the power sector with a sense of speed. It needs to be more concrete. We need to invest to accelerate this transition. I think we need political decision on this point. And also we need concrete roadmaps as well for the power sector. Unless that's the case, we will not be able to address. I have engagement with electric power companies. I really see a sense of frustration when I do a dialogue with these people. So we have 2030, only 10 years left. We need post-transition plan after 2030. But this is not clear to many of the investors at this point from this sector. So I think the overall directionality, the vague directionality is there, but we need more concrete information. But that is not coming. We're not able to see tangible roadmaps. So that being the case, this year, in the general shareholders meeting, we had many general shareholders meeting in the month of June. And also, there were a lot of propositions on the part of shareholders with regard to climate change in many of these meetings this year. And also, it's not just environmental NGOs. Investor groups are now asking Japanese companies to work more on climate change. They need short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals for the climate change-related measures. And investors are now making recommendations for greater disclosure on the part of the companies. So I think this is really the flip side of the coin of the sense of urgency. We need more concrete information. Unless we have that concrete information, we cannot make adjustments and assessments about the enterprise value. Thank you so much. So we started with energy mix discussion. Of course, self-efforts are important, of course. And I think we need a sense of urgency with the outside stakeholders as well. When it comes to power, international rules are now being swayed when it comes to the source of power. For example, the European taxonomy is out there, and the treatment of gas was considered very negative, but that Europe is now changing its attitude toward gas. So these international rules and classifications are now changing. I think we're being swayed by the international classifications. But then international rules, if they change, the companies but the companies cannot come up with a new plan just because international rules change. So the Japanese companies, so Japan as a country, Japanese industry needs to have more greater discussion as to what do they want to do on their own. Thank you so much. So we talked about international climate change, and we talked about the sense of urgency. So Emori-san, I would like to turn to you. You heard from Tagawa-san and Omi-san. So Emori-san, what are your thoughts about the recent situation? Emori-san, I know that we do not have time to educate each individual consumer, so we cannot focus on educating consumers one by one. We need to change the systems. How do you see the need to change the system overall? Well, thank you for the question. This is a thought that I've had for quite some time, and I really get the sense that financial industry is really moving at a very dynamic pace. Financial industries are changing. So pressure from the supply chain, pressure from the financial industry is now changing the industry. And that is now translating to change in society. So that aspect is there. And so this part is very dynamic. As far as I see it, I think it's become more dynamic. But on the other hand, though, what about society? What about the public? People are being left behind. They're being marginalized. They're not able to keep a pace with the changes taking place in the society. Do we need more education? Do we need to change the awareness of each individual citizens? Many people point this out. But as was mentioned by Haniuta-san, I believe we do not have the time to convince and educate each individual citizens. We don't have that luxury of time. Now, fortunately, these days, the students these days, they learn about SDGs in schools. And these are SDG native generations. These young people are SDG native generations. So I think this will become common sense going forward among these young generation as a result of this type of education at school. But we are adults. So the older generation, I'm afraid, they have no idea what SDGs are about. Many people have that type of value. But it's against this backdrop that we need to change our society. So you talked about the need to change the system. Yes, we talk about the need to change the system. Each individual, maybe they could choose eco-friendly services, but then that type of campaign is going to be too time-consuming. So I think we need to create a situation where eco-friendly things are only available products on the marketplace. We have one good example of this. This is not related to the mobility sector, but please bear with me. There was a draft proposal. The draft proposal to change the construction industry was passed at the Parliament, and also in 2035 or so, I believe. So construction insulation materials, only the environmentally friendly insulation materials could be utilized. Now, this draft proposal was not supposed to be discussed and deliberated at the Parliament. However, the citizens spoke up, and the construction and the engineers also spoke up, and they made a lot of noise saying that this draft proposal needs to be discussed, and this could have had repercussions on the election results. So as a result, this draft proposal was deliberated, and also the insulation materials in construction have now made a step forward. So when citizens speak out, they can create rules, and once you have the rules, then although people may complain in the beginning, but once you have the rules, this becomes the norm after time. So that type of example is one thing that could take place going forward. So what about the auto sector then? In 2035 or after 2035, I believe electric vehicles, the new vehicles will have to be electric vehicles. I believe that is not the discussion take place in Japan. But we have the hybrid out there. But hybrid, if you sell hybrid in 2035, then in the year 2015, then you will not be able to achieve the 100% zero emission by 2050. So in 2035, actually you should only sell zero emission cars as new cars. I think that should be the principle. Of course, we need the transition of employment structure at the supply chains. I know that this involves very difficult decision-making process. I understand that. But still, if the citizens speak up, if they want zero emission, if that is the case, once you have that trend, then it's inevitable. So you need to make an all-out effort to make transition in the employment structure and thereby bring a change in society. And this becomes the norm at that time. I hope that we have many such examples in the future. Thank you for that. So in the election that took place in Germany, the focus was not so much on COVID-19, but was more on climate change. That was the voters' recognition. The top priority on the part of the voters was climate change, not COVID-19. So people can speak up and change the rules. We need to be aware of the possibility. This can change. This can really bring about significant change overall. I think this is very real, and we really need to bring about such change. Thank you so much for that input. So we've been talking. So let me talk about a related topic. If we want to bring about social change in a significant manner, we need extensive partnership if we are to realize very broad changes. So let's focus and talk about the broad partnerships in session 2. This relates to all the viewers who are listening to the program today. So climate change, we are really have a sense of urgency when it comes to climate change. So we need action. We're very concerned about taking action to collaborate with various partners. I think we need a more broad picture. We should focus not just on partners with whom we collaborate. I think we should also focus on linkage between various issues. I think we need to delve further in terms of linkage between various issues and challenges. So let me ask, Nissan, you're involved in many initiatives, not only internal measures, but you're engaged with the society and the community. You have linkage with society and outside forces, I'm sure. So can you talk about your collaboration with outside partners? Tagawa-san, please.
Yes, one is that we are implementing Blue Switch program, and we are working together with the municipalities to make an agreement about the natural calamities. When there's a natural calamities, there will be a blackout. So, for example, we provide Nissan Leaf EV as a power storage where you can charge your mobile phones or heat your houses. So this is a partnership with the municipalities or partnership with businesses. This is one of the key initiatives underway. In Japan, we have more than 180 agreements with the local authorities, and we would like to extend it to Asia or other regions which may be affected by the natural calamities. Another one is the one we are doing in the Namie town in Fukushima Prefecture. We are linking people and goods with the mobility in Namie town of Fukushima. We are doing this field operation. You see the graphics on screen. Nissan and these shopping malls, these business owners, whether it's a post office or schools or hospitals, these entities, we are doing a pilot of mobility services to go through these locations. We have depopulation with the aging society. There are elderly people who have to return their driver's license, which is not limited to Fukushima Prefecture. So by delivering the autonomous driving cars and EV, we are trying to address these societal issues which we are facing in Japan. So this is one of the solutions that we are working on.
Thank you very much. So you talked about collaboration and partnership with the communities. What are some of the challenges you face when you collaborate with those stakeholders? I'm sure that you have visited various communities, I'm sure, but what are some of the challenges you need to overcome going forward? Your impressions, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
For example, when it comes to the agreement of natural calamities, when there are typhoon number 15 or 17, right after typhoons, many local municipalities society shows interest. But once the storms calm down, people lose interest. But fortunately, today, all the local communities or authorities are also working on carbon neutrality and other sustainable goals. So when we provide something affordable as a solution, so they are more interested in these agreements at the time of natural calamity. So I think this will be accelerated if this allows.
Thank you. I think there are several keywords. You talked about climate change. You also talked about the disaster in relation, aging and depopulation in relation to Namitan. So these are very impressive. You talked about several keywords. So let me link now with Emori-san. I think today we are focused on climate change, but then what about the linkage with other issues? There should be interlinkage, right? For example, climate change and biodiversity. They're interlinked, aren't they? There's a deep linkage between the two. So how should we see the linkage between various issues? I think they have to be simultaneously addressed. So how should we address those linkages among different issues? Yes, thank you. Climate change and biodiversity. Climate change and biodiversity, they're now topical, I understand. And one very straightforward example I can cite. Earlier, Takao-san talked about decarbonization of power source. He talked about and also expanding the use of renewables. This is very important for EV. That was what was mentioned by Takao-san earlier. So if that is the case, then we need a lot of photovoltaic panels throughout Japan. Hopefully that could be done throughout Japan. Then this could actually translate to undermining of the biodiversity. The feed-in tariff system was very profitable, so many very producers came into the market. This led to over-extraction in the power source. And also the urban financial institutions really developed the various markets in the local communities, and they took up all the profits away from the local communities. So going forward, this type of structure will be adjusted and changed. So climate change, we want to halt the temperature rise by 1.5 degrees, and the CO2 emission target has been set. When it comes to biodiversity, 30 by 30 is set by 2030. There will be 30% of protected areas on land as well as on sea. And so 30-30 is the target that they're aiming for in biodiversity. Now, the biodiversity and climate change experts, they're all there in our institution. So there's a trade-off. Are we fighting between the two camps? That is not the case. Why are we not fighting? Because people who are involved in biodiversity research, they need to hold climate change, even if they prioritize biodiversity, because climate change is a major stress upon the biodiversity naturally. So therefore, from their perspective, climate change has to be halted. And in that process, at the same time, we have to be creative, because biodiversity could be undermined in this year. So they have to be compatible. So there's a sense of trade-off. We need to adjust and strike a balance between the trade-off and set good zoning, and then realize synergy. That is what we want to do. So biodiversity and climate change, that is the type of linkage we see. Among other issues as well, there's a trade-off and synergy. So we need to identify the synergy as well as trade-off, make sure that we can minimize the trade-off as much as possible, and try to locate various resources and try to extract synergy from these two different issues. I say thank you very much. So you talked about the linkage between climate change and biodiversity. So if I could ask Omi-san, now TCFD, this is a disclosure of carbon. We also have another disclosure of nature as well. So financial institution, how do you see the disclosure in relation to biodiversity? Yes, thank you. We're also prioritizing biodiversity as a financial institution. In particular, when it comes to stewardship engagement, we have some priorities, 5 priorities when it comes to the stewardship. One is climate change. Naturally, that is part of the 5 priorities. So biodiversity is a related topic. It was not an independent topic, but this year we reviewed these priorities. Biodiversity has been identified as a very important priority for engagement. So that is the internal discussion that we're having. And having said that, when it comes to biodiversity, KPI is very difficult to set. So what type of framework can we have for dialogue to address biodiversity? That is what we're working on as we speak internally. We're having this discussion right now. Thank you very much for that. So indeed, so there's the evolution on the part of the financial institutions, and also rulemaking is also progressing in the society as well. So Omi-san, you talked about you're viewing the companies from a very broad perspective. Natagawa-san talked about ESG investment. This term is now very popular. It's common, but ESG, they're addressed independently or focusing only on environment per se. So many companies only focus on the environment per se. So how can we connect E as well as S and G? What should companies do to connect E, S, and G? Yes, when it comes to sustainability and governance, these are very important. I believe that's the most important issue. I was listening to Takawa-san's presentation at the beginning of the session. So this purpose, if we are to achieve purpose of the company, we need long-term vision and focus on materiality in a robust manner, and having analysis on robust, we should focus on not just environment, we should also strike a balance between societal issues as well. By identifying that, it's important that sustainability promotion needs to be promoted. You need a structure and the monitor. There should be a structuring to monitor the progress. So at the board, for example, we need supervision on the part of the board to make sure that there is progress in these fronts. So that it's not. So you should focus not just on environment. You should also for society and government. There should be a policy that is very comprehensive in nature, covering all these three issues. Thank you, Takawa-san. If I could ask, earlier in your presentation, you talked about materiality. You also focused on human rights. This was a very important materiality topic. Now, I'm an advisor to METI and business and human rights. I'm also addressing the relationship between human rights and business. Can you talk about human rights related initiative? There's so much focus on decarbonization in the press report, but you focus not just on E, but you're also very active in S as well as G. So can you talk about the evolution of the discussion on the part of Nissan in relation to ESG?
Yes, with regards to human rights, since 20 years ago, we thought that we were addressing human rights issues, but the external entity rating agency, CHRB, they started appreciating the auto sector 2 years ago, and compared to other industry, auto industry was poorly evaluated, and Nissan's score was unexpectedly low. So we analyzed what was inside the scores, and with regards to human rights, we discovered that we defined the goals, established a cross-functional team, and just not by striving, we actually linked the human rights indicators to the executive compensation. If you think about the figure of CHRP, many top executives ask what this is about, and does this determine their executive compensation? This helps us to increase the awareness of the importance of human rights. And at the EC Executive Committee and Board of Directors meeting, we have more frequency to debate about the human rights, not only about internal perception. We see the difference between internal perception and external perception. In this challenge, we involved suppliers, OEM and Tier 1 suppliers. We can deal with the first-tier suppliers. When it comes to Tier N suppliers, there may be child labor or harassment. So as a group, across the value chain, we want to translate this action that address the human rights. And this is a very big challenge indeed, but we have to address this.
Indeed. Among the SDG, we're also focused on child labor. The SDGs should be achieved by 2030. But in the case of child labor, it's goal 8.7. That is because we want to put 0 by 2025. So if we are to reduce child labor to 0 by 2030, the society really has to change significantly before that can be done. So Nissan is really focused on materiality. I'm very impressed that you're focused on this element in terms of materiality goals. So be it child labor, human rights. Among the viewers who hear this term, you might wonder, why are we talking about human rights, although we're supposed to focus on climate change. So let me try and go back to the topic of climate change and go back to Emori-san. Earlier, you did not use the term, but Omi-san, you mentioned climate justice. So human rights and climate change are related. They're linked, right? So can you focus on this, the link between the two once again? Yes. I frequently talk about the following topic. People who are not the cause of global warming are most affected by the devastation of global warming. So that represents very severe violation of human rights. That is why we need to halt climate change. That's one thing that we need to be mindful of. What if you were in their shoes? Can you think about that? If you can think about that, then I think the discussion will be much more straightforward. Now, there was a talk about how Japan will sink. There was a drama, TV drama. We frequently hear about this drama, but what if Japan were to sink because of something done by non-Japanese? How would the Japanese feel if the nation sank because of a foreigners' activity? That's so unreasonable, right? But that is taking place in climate change, especially among small island nations. That is what they're faced with. We need to understand that that's the predicament on the part of these small island nations. But it's not just this element. Be it climate change or be it biodiversity, or be it human rights in relation to supply chain. The most vulnerable people are there. It's the most vulnerable people who are most disaffected, who are most disadvantaged by that. So if we can be mindful of that, then I think everything will fall into place. Thank you, I agree. So people who are most vulnerable. It's not just limited to global warming. Yes, it's also young generation who are also not responsible for the global warming. So it's these young people who will be most affected. So that is why in Europe there's a lot of active movement to bring about change. So if I could go back to Omi-san once again. So I think the financial industry is also evolving. If I could ask this question to you. So finance of today and the next generation, I know this is a very vague question, I apologize, but the children today, when they become active members of the society in decades, the financial industry needs to change, right? So as mentioned by Emori-san, these are young people who are not responsible for the global warming, but they will, so that these people will not be affected by climate change, the financial industry will probably have to change. How do you intend to change and evolve? Yes, I think we have been talking about this throughout the panel discussion. We need to accelerate our initiatives to halt climate change. So as a member of the financial industry, I think this needs to be factored in our investment decisions. But then that remains very ambiguous and very difficult to do. So we need to internalize those elements into our investment decision. So we need to price carbon. And it needs to be integrated with the economy and our decision-making process. Because unless that is the case, we will not be able to invest in innovations. We will not be able to change consumption behavior. So this needs to be done as soon as possible. Now, changing carbon pricing is taking place in Japan, but not on a large scale. So we need to do this on a more extensive scale. So that being the case, we need to internalize these transitions, and we need to face these transitions squarely. That is very important. So I think we need a sense of speed. Yes, there might be pain along the way, but when it comes to climate change, we need fair evolution. We need equitable evolution and transition. So in that respect, I think it is important that we reinforce human resources in this area. We need to re-educate people in this area, and so mitigate the pain as much as possible, and try to mobilize major change. We need to realize change on an extensive scale. We need to partnership among a large number of people. We need collaboration among many different stakeholders. That is very important. Thank you very much for that. Very good comment. It's important that we need to collaborate with many stakeholders. That's the key word. So Takao-san, let me ask. Earlier, you have a strong track record. You have linkages to collaboration with various communities out there. So Takao-san, if I could ask, ask Taka-san if you could send a message to the viewers and make a report. So, Nissan, who are the potential stakeholders that you want to collaborate with? Do you have stakeholders that you've been able to partner with up until now? Is it going to be government, NPOs, a member of the same industry? So, with whom would you like to collaborate going forward? Can you talk about that?
Yes, as you all mentioned, what auto industry can do in terms of global warming or human rights are very limited. Away from the traditional automotive business, in order to hit carbon neutrality goals, we need to work with different industries and different players. So far, we belong to JAMA, Japan Automobile Manufacturing Association, Parts Association, Supply Association. Within the industry, we have been driving the actions. For example, at Nissan, we have an alliance partnership with Mitsubishi Motors and Renault, and we are going to accelerate these traditional initiatives. But what we are starting today is in the domain of carbon neutrality. In order to address carbon neutrality goals, we need the involvement of Steel Association, Aluminum Association, and energy sector as well, which requires to be evolving. So in the entire Japanese industry, of course, automotive sector is emitting a lot of gas. This is a responsibility. But across the Japanese industry, we need to realize carbon neutrality. Upstream energy sector, as well as the auto parts like steel, aluminum, and glass, these sectors should be decarbonizing themselves. So this is a partnership that we are looking for. And also IT industry or startups. These are the entities we need to involve. Whether it's Tesla or other Chinese startups, they are generating different ideas and taking on different challenges. So we should go beyond the traditional auto industry framework and be involved in new initiatives.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we've been discussing this topic. We are now nearing the end of this panel discussion. So having heard the comments of these three panelists, I think there's one feature of our discussion today. Now, your positions may vary, but I think that the discussion is in sync. We did not have conflicting views, which is good. When we focus on sustainability discussion, a couple of years ago, based on one single keyword, superficially they may get along, but actually, in panel discussions, though, although there was superficial agreement, there was a conflict. It's about economic rationality, because be it climate change or be it other social issues, the more countermeasures you do, the more you do, it's going to be costly. But then you're a company, so you need to solve social challenges, but you also need to be profitable. So that is the key word. So at first glance, it might seem that we're in sync, but actually beneath the surface, many of you were fighting. That was the nature of many panel discussions of a couple of years ago. But today, I think in terms of the sense of urgency, I think we have a very positive circulation now. We have a very positive cycle. I think your discussion really allowed us to be very proactive and more positive. So, yes, there's, as a financial institution, you talked about scrutiny on the part of the companies. That's a good positive pressure. So I think we have a great understanding as to what people want. It's no longer just, this is for, because if you do this, this is going to be for your company and also for the industry, and it will be beneficial for these generations to come. So I think we had a very good discussion today. We were in sync. So the viewers, I hope that you get the sense that we had consistency in views among the panelists today. My expectation is that when we come to next year or 2 years ago, when we have the similar discussion, hopefully that we're going to be even in greater sync. We hope that the virtuous cycle hopefully can be continued. If people sense that there's a positive virtuous cycle, then I think as a consumer we'll be able to take new actions. And we can really start a movement to change rules in a significant manner. So I get a very positive feedback from the discussion today. I'm afraid my time management was very, very bad. We were running out of time. So could we have one last remark from each of you? One final remark from each of the panelists. Can you talk about partnership, your thoughts about climate change and partnership? If you have a message to the viewers out there. So could we start with Emori-san, your last remark, please. Yes, thank you very much. Earlier, I was listening to Takao-san's comment. You mentioned that you want to break the mold of auto industry. You want to break. That was very impressive. And I think you give a sense of hope that you want to break the mold of the auto industry. I think if I could talk about the future vision, if we focus on 2050, for example, what is going to happen to mobility? It is not yet clear. Now, smartphones in Japan, we added functions to the mobile phone. The mobile phone is like a small PC, isn't it? You can make phone calls, but it's a small PC. And that became the most popular model. So in the case of automobiles, you thought that you were producing cars, but now you're creating a running PC. People who come up with running PCs are going to be more advantageous. So I think we're really in a major change of dynamic change. We don't know how the situation will evolve. That's because of COVID-19. People are beginning remote communication. So online is alternating and substituting for mobility, and VR is now expanding. So that being the case, producing good cars, be decarbonized. Selling a lot of the business model of producing a large number of cars. So this will come into question because of the situation going forward. So I hope that Nissan will take this situation in hand and have a sense of optimism that Nissan is mindful of these changes. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I do appreciate it. Okay, Omi-san, what about yourself? Well, thank you. I think each individual, you are a stakeholder, you're an employee. You're a member of the community, you're a consumer, you're all stakeholders, you're all involved. So be it SDGs, in order to achieve SDGs, each individual needs to be committed. We need that mindset in order to change the society. Thank you very much. Tagawa-san, please.
Yes, today's session, Emori-san, you talked about human rights and environment and making changes with citizen power. Wow, they're all informative information. Omi-san, in fact, usually between company and asset management investors, we have a lot of engagement with the financial institutions. But ultimately, we have to make sure that the company, us, once the financial institute understand how much we are working on sustainability, and you make more investment on us, and we can accelerate the efforts and make more contributions. So after today's session, Omi-san, I want you to be our friend. So going forward, we would like to ensure a better communication. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Hanuda-san. You are a wonderful moderator. So we talked about addressing the essential issue of climate change. Thank you for the panel discussion. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the meaningful debate. With this, we would like to conclude Nissan Sustainability Seminar 2022. Thank you for watching this.